Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Helen. How are you today, Helen?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm very well, thank you very much. Ready for another podcast. So what are we talking about today, Helen?
Well, today you promised that you were going to educate us on the Gestalt approach to coaching, which I'm really looking forward to because there's some points I think I need to know more about.
Yeah, good. So another approach to coaching that we're exploring today. And as you say, it's Gestalt. We have to make sure we say it right. I was saying Gestalt for a long time. I hear a lot of people saying Gestalt, but it's a German word, and I had someone on our course who was German said, yeah, it's Gestalt.
Gestalt.
And I did have someone else on a counselling course once, and the lady that I was talking about Gestalt, or Gestalt as I was saying at that time, and this lady just had this reaction to me saying it. She said, can you stop saying that? I said, what? She said, that word you keep saying. I said, Gestalt. She said, oh yeah, I don't like it. She said, that's a real visceral reaction to me saying it. Anyway.
That's strange, we digress.
We digress, yes. So, that is what we're talking about today.
Yes. So tell me, where does the Gestalt approach originate from?
So, Gestalt coaching comes from Gestalt therapy, and this was the creation of Laura and Fritz Perls. I like to get Laura in because she gets forgotten a little bit in all this. Fritz Perls.
Women in history get forgotten, really?
Yeah. So I like to give her a name call. So Laura and Fritz Perls, who were a German couple who moved to America after the Second World War and set up the Gestalt Institute in New York. So yeah, they were the founders of it. Other people have taken it on beyond them. So Fritz was a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. Laura was actually involved in Gestalt psychology before it became a form of psychotherapy. And she was also a psychotherapist. So when they separated in the 60s. Laura stayed in New York and Fritz Perls went to California and became part of that, new age Californian thing. So set up another institute there. So that's the background.
Okay, so before we get on to Gestalt, I'm kind of scared of saying the name now, Gestalt.
That's fine. You're doing it well.
Okay. Before we get on to the Gestalt coaching, let's just clarify for listeners what the word Gestalt actually means, because it's a strange word, isn't it? And not one everyone will have come across.
No, and some people, I've had people say to me, so who was he?
Yes.
But it is a German word. It doesn't have, it's like Schadenfreude. It doesn't have a literal translation in English, but it generally means the whole, or a whole or complete experience. That's what we're talking about when we talk about Gestalt. So us sitting here today, having this discussion, recording a podcast, this is a Gestalt.
Okay.
Yeah? And when it comes to an end, it will be over. Now, Pete will go away and he'll edit it, but for us, the recording of the Gestalt approach to coaching is a Gestalt in itself. It's done. It's dusted. Mm-hmm. Now, Pete might come back to me and say, oh, can we edit this bit? So that might reopen that Gestalt, but it is a complete experience. It's finished. And our recording of podcasts is a wider Gestalt. So our experience of, from time to time, recording a podcast and having that series of podcasts, that's a Gestalt. At some point, that will come to an end as well, and that will be a complete experience. It will all be over.
So there's a Gestalt within a Gestalt.
Yes.
And if you think about our business, the podcast is a Gestalt within our overall business, which includes our training programs for doctors and our blog posts.
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily say the business is a Gestalt because it's the experience. So maybe the experience of running a business is a Gestalt, but it's all about experience, really. So us running a training program is a Gestalt. So on the morning that we run one of our sessions, that session is a Gestalt. And within the whole diploma, that's a Gestalt itself. The whole diploma is a Gestalt. So someone training to become a coach, their training is a Gestalt. And within that, they will have smaller Gestalts, which is the experience of a workshop.
Okay.
There you go.
Lovely.
That's what a Gestalt is. But yeah, I don't think we need to worry too much about that. But that's the origin of the word and what it means.
Okay, so it has to do with the whole experience. But what does the whole experience of a Gestalt have to do with coaching?
Okay, so a Gestalt is, say, whole experience should be lovely. It should flow smoothly. There should be that, just we'll flow through the experience and we'll come to an end, and we'll look back at it and go, oh, that was lovely.
Like recording these podcasts.
No
hiccups at all.
No.
Yeah.
So that will happen in a very untroubled way, and it will all flow. So we'll bring something into our awareness, and we'll start to explore it, and then we'll engage with it and maybe work towards a desired outcome, and that will finish, and it will all be over, and then that will die away, and our attention will turn to something else, and that will be a new gestalt that we start to explore. So that should be how it works. But sometimes things don't work that way, and people become a little bit stuck. So they become stuck in their gestalt at some point, and coaching can really help them to become unstuck and to move again more smoothly through their gestalt.
This sounds like a bit of a nightmare, getting stuck in a recording session endlessly.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but that's where coaching, and obviously therapy before it, but I think certainly within the coaching room we can start to look at where someone is stuck and maybe look at that cycle of experience and go, okay, well, where are we on this? At what point are you stuck, and how can the coaching help?
Okay, so coaching helps to close off this gestalt that you get stuck in and helps you to move on to your next experience.
Yes. So we obviously want people to be, so if we think about coaching, there's always a future focus, there's a desired outcome, isn't there? And we would like people to get to their desired outcome, go, that's lovely, I've done that, and then move on to something else. Mm-hmm. It might be an extension of what they've just explored, but we want that to come to an end and then for them to move further on.
Interesting. This is making more sense to me now. Good.
Okay.
So the idea of being stuck somewhere within a gestalt does sound like coaching territory. And thinking about this podcast, sometimes in preparing for the podcast, that can feel a bit sticky. And we've had a couple of occasions where we might end the podcast and you might say, I'm not happy with something I've said. You're wondering how people might react. It might be controversial occasionally. And I know that sometimes you have a stress over that situation. So in a sense, that would be you stuck in that gestalt.
Yeah, stuck at the end of it. So I'm not letting go of it. And again, that can be something that you can help people within the coaching room where they're still, that gestalt is still being experienced and they're not moving on. They're still attached to it in some way. But that's right at the end of a gestalt. But there are other places through the gestalt that they might become stuck.
I see. So that's an overview of what a gestalt might be. And I know we're going to do a separate podcast. Our next episode is going to be on the Gestalt cycle of experience that you mentioned earlier and how people might become stuck. So let's leave that and move
we'll do
on.
That next time.
Yeah, and we'll think now about Gestalt and coaching. So what would you say is the Gestalt approach to coaching?
So as a Gestalt coach, we're exploring, uncovering, understanding what's really going on from the inside out for the coachee and helping them direct their energy into fully experiencing and accepting what's going on in the present. So that's another big thing about Gestalt is working in the present. So
working in the present, becoming who you are. I mean, this does sound like our type of coaching.
Yes. Transformational
coaching, absolutely.
Yeah. So that will then allow the flow of change. So if they are looking to change something in their lives, if they can approach that in a very genuine way of who they are rather than trying to be something else, then that will flow much more easily. So it's about self-awareness and self-responsibility. So increasing the awareness of the coachee so that they understand themselves better and their connection to the world. And then once they start to become more who they are, they can take responsibility for their choices and the consequences of those choices, but do it in a really authentic way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that if they have limiting beliefs, which is something we explored in the cognitive behavioural approach to coaching, or unhelpful thinking or engaging behaviour that's unwanted, that we just leave them where they are and go, well, that's just them. They're just being who they are. There is still that opportunity for change. But because actually some of the beliefs, the biases, the defence strategies that we all engage in, the barriers that we put up around us, and those what they refer to in Gestalt as creative adjustments. We all make those as we go through life, kind of to protect ourselves. And it's those creative adjustments that lead to us getting stuck. So that's what we're working with in coaching. And thinking about that creative adjustment, if we think about it from a physical perspective, and a physical injury. So you recently have had a bad knee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for a few weeks you were hobbling.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
But that's a creative adjustment that you made
Yes.
to protect your knee, to stop you feeling pain.
Yes.
And that's a physical way of describing that. Now, for some people, they will have emotional pain and they will have experiences that are uncomfortable. So what we all do is make creative adjustments to stop that pain and head off the discomfort. And those become potential fixed gestalts that we can't move past. Yeah.
I like using that physical analogy because I think a lot of people can relate to that, and it helps to understand what you mean by creative adjustments.
Yeah. So we might need to do some work to get back to the real person that isn't making those creative adjustments. So if someone's doing something that is unhelpful or thinking in an unhelpful way, trying to understand how they've got to that point. And say quite often it will have been the result of something else that's led them to making that creative adjustment.
So what are some of the key elements of Gestalt coaching then?
It's about awareness. So everything that we do in the coaching room, as a coach, we're very aware of what's going on in the coaching room with the coachee. So not only are we listening to the words they're saying, we're also listening to their tone of voice. We're looking for any emotion that comes up in their voice. We're looking for their facial expression whilst they're talking. We're looking for any changes in their body language. So it's all about our awareness as a coach, and also increasing their awareness of what's going on for them. It's also concerned with the way in which the coachee experiences and thinks about things. It's concerned with what's in the here and now. So it's very much about working in the present. So we can't change the past, it's gone. We can't work in the future because it hasn't arrived yet. So we have to bring everything into the present. So we're working in the here and now in the coaching room with the coachee. It's relationship centered, as I think most coaching is relationship centered, isn't it? In the way that we do coaching, whatever approach we use is going to be relationship centered. So person centered, it's very much about that connection that the coach has with the coachee. If we think about transactional analysis, we've got that adult to adult connection. And in Gestalt, we have the I-thou connection. So we're connecting with that other person on the same level. And it's also based, the other important thing about Gestalt is that it's based on the principle that change is constant and that it only happens in the present. So you and I will leave this recording this morning as different people. We're not the same people that arrived and started recording. Something will have changed in this recording, this session. So obviously you were saying that there are some things about Gestalt that you're not fully aware of and you'd like to know more. So you will leave with more information about Gestalt. But so that will change you in some way. So there's a lovely Heraclitus, I think, the Greek philosopher, said, no one can step into the same river twice. Because you're not the same person that stepped into it the first time. Obviously the river's different, it's different water, isn't it? But yeah, so no one can step into the same river twice. And I think that's the point with Gestalt, is we are constantly changing, even though we might not be noticing it. So rather than saying, okay, I want to head for this specific goal, I want to make this change, it's recognising that things are going to change anyway.
Yeah. I love this. This is really interesting.
So just to sort of broaden those 5 things out, if we start with the awareness, great emphasis in Gestalt coaching on being fully present and noticing what you're noticing in the coaching room. So to say, we're going to do all the sort of body language, facial expression. We're going to calibrate how they are normally. And then when they start to talk about something else that's uncomfortable for them, we're going to notice changes in them that we're going to reflect back to them. So I had a lady not so long ago who, when she started to talk about something that was uncomfortable for her, she started playing with a necklace. And the moment she stopped talking about it, she stopped playing with the necklace. And I just noticed that, and I just said, I noticed when you were talking about that, you started playing with your necklace. What did that mean to you? I said, I really don't want to do that. And now she hadn't said that out loud. She just talked about it in a very matter-of-fact way. But just bringing her back to that awareness that she was doing something because she felt uncomfortable, even though she wasn't saying it. So that can be really powerful. So we're going to be noticing all of that stuff. And so we're trying to raise the awareness of the coachee as well.
And that's probably something that coaches do if they are empathetic without realising that it's part of Gestalt.
Yes. No, I think you're right. And I think the important thing in Gestalt is noticing what you notice and actually playing it back. So as someone who's empathetic, you might notice what's going on, but you might just keep it to yourself. So there's a certain amount of self-disclosure, some disclosure of what you're noticing with the coachee, rather than just listening to what they say and then asking a question and moving on. It's going, oh, that's interesting. So that's another element of Gestalt coaching, is the curiosity that comes with what you're noticing. So the second point I was making was about the coachee's experience and that cycle of experience. So it's really about how they think about things. We're trying to connect with what's actually happening for the coachee. So cognitively, emotionally, physiologically, and to a certain extent spiritually, we really want to get to understand what's going on for them. So we're also trying to get a real sense of understanding about what's happening in the here and now as the coachee starts to address issues. Now, those issues might seem to have a place in the past or a place in the future, but they're actually in the here and now because the coachee's decided to bring them into the coaching room. So they are there in the present moment, and we're going to work with them in the present moment.
So they might not be happening now, but they're in their conscious awareness because they're
we're bringing them into the coaching room. So if we're talking about perhaps a conversation that they've had with someone at work a week ago that's still troubling them, it sounds as though it's in the past, but actually the troubling aspect of it is still with them. They've not let go of it.
Yeah.
So they're bringing it into the present. So we're working with that in the present in the coaching room. As I mentioned, Gestalt's also very relationship-based. So it's that recognition that the coachee has a relationship with other people and their environment, and everything in their world is interconnected and having an effect on them. So again, going back to their cognition, their emotions, their physiology, that's all being impacted by their environment. So this obviously includes the relationship between the coach and the coachee. So that has to be authentic. There has to be that contact between them. And the coach is very much an important part of that exploration for the coachee.
Because the coach is almost like the river that you're stepping into.
Ooh, that sounds a bit profound.
Well, I was just thinking, because, you know, if someone is dealing with a situation on their own, it's one thing. But if someone is dealing with a situation in collaboration with a facilitator like a coach...
Maybe you're both stepping into the river together.
Oh, maybe yeah. Maybe the experience of coaching is the river.
Yeah, I think that's probably a better way of thinking about it.
Yeah,
that you are with them in the river.
And maybe I'm overthinking it.
Maybe.
But I can see as well how there's some crossover with the cognitive behavioural approach that we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yes. But I think the difference with Gestalt is in the noticing and the actual working with it, rather than saying, oh, well, that's a limiting belief. How much of that is real? You know, and doing it in a very, just the dialogue. I think we can, in a Gestalt sense, work in a different way and actually experiment a little bit with the coaching in front of us.
Okay, which we'll come on to in a bit.
Yeah, so the fifth element I just wanted to go back to was that idea of change. And I guess, like most other approaches, Gestalt is interested in change, but with a bit of a difference. So that idea that the change is happening all the time, but it only happens in the present. Change isn't going to happen in the future. It can't happen in the past because that's already gone. So it can only happen in the present. So in Gestalt coaching, we focus on the present, bring everything the coachee is discussing into the present moment. So Gestalt's concerned with paradoxical change. So it is that idea that the more we strive to change to become what we're not, the more we stay the same.
That's just blown my mind.
But I think thinking of it from the opposite way, if we accept who we are as a whole person and really accept what lies at the heart of our being, then we start to change naturally, and that change will start to flow naturally.
Okay.
But if we try, so going back to the analogy of someone in an organisation being asked to have coaching to be different to how they are, They might be in a leadership. I had someone recently that was told in a leadership sense that she needed in meetings. Someone on our course needed to be more vocal in meetings. She needs to speak up and have a say and just be more robust in meetings. That's not her. She's an introvert. She's more reflective. She likes to think about things before she speaks. So someone's forcing her to be a different way. But she's not. That's not going to change her. She's still going to be the same person. So actually working in a way that's more authentic to her. And it might be that she's not a good fit for that organisation.
So by going back to and focusing on who you are, you will find your way to make the change that you need. I see. Okay, I'm getting my head around that now. So practically, how do we use this approach in the coaching room? Because you mentioned experimentation.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, because there are some obvious places where Gestalt coaching is a perfect fit, and then other places where it's perhaps not going to work at all. So it isn't really useful if someone wants coaching around working on tactical objectives, like very operational stuff. So that's step-by-step action planning, and that's not Gestalt. Logical analysis, learning new skills. We're not going to be doing Gestalt with any of that. Where it's really useful is around any ambiguity, that someone has any ambivalence they have. It's really useful in working on relationships. So if someone's got a problematic relationship, bringing that relationship into the coaching room and working with it in the coaching room can be really helpful. It's really useful to think about the client's identity and that becoming more who they are. So that's a really good space. Obviously, any future vision, that's a really useful thing to explore with a Gestalt approach. And then creativity and innovation. I think those are two other aspects where Gestalt can be really helpful. So it definitely has a distinct place, and I think there is something really transformational about Gestalt coaching. It does change people if the coaching is successful in working with them. So something about it that's creative and fun. So we will experiment. We'll get the coachee to move around. We'll get them out of their seat. We'll get them to look at things from different perspectives. Might get them to sit in different chairs, to explore the world in different ways. We might ask them to, it's a really interesting one, we might ask them to exaggerate gestures that they're making to see what it feels like, to really overemphasize if they start talking about something and start to make a gesture. And go, well, what does that mean as you're making that gesture? Just to amplify that for me, make that bigger. How does it feel for it to be bigger? Now, that sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. But the great thing about Gestalt is it's an experiment. If it doesn't work and someone goes, well, no, I don't like that, we can move back from it and we can try a different experiment. So all the time we're experimenting in the coaching room. There's a lovely video of Fritz Perls. I say lovely video, it's quite a strange video. So back in the 60s, 3 therapists, so Carl Rogers from the person-centered approach, Fritz Perls from Gestalt, and Albert Ellis from the rational emotive behavioural approach, were asked to have a televised therapy session with this lady called Gloria. And Carl Rogers was, as you would expect, he was lovely, very person-centred, very calming, very just listened and talked. Albert Ellis, like one of the early founders of cognitive behavioural coaching, was very challenging. So, well, your thinking is all wrong. Why are you thinking like that? So it was a very challenging approach. And then Fritz Perls was just very strange. He was just would say, well, so why are you giggling? Why are you giggling like a little girl? You're not a little girl. And just very, it's just a really odd, it's lovely to watch. So go back, it's on YouTube, so have a listen and a watch. But he was strange in that sense. So, but he did this thing of, why are you doing this with what's this mean, what you're doing with your arms? He said, do that more. And she just wasn't having it at all and said, why are you getting me to do these things? And it's all very confrontational. So not what we're going to do in the coaching. No, we're not going to do that in coaching. But it's like interesting to see where it all comes from.
It's really interesting that you're talking about this kind of observation and experimentation, and because actually what it's making me realise is that without knowing it, a lot of my coaching is actually Gestalt-y.
Say more.
Well, I think working with people to find the things they currently do physiologically, so their posture, that perhaps they don't realise they're doing which contributes to them feeling in a particular way, and that by changing that, playing with it, finding a new way to stand, for example, or to sit or to move, how does that impact how they're perceived? You know, that embodiment element that I work with, that seems to be a bit of a Gestalt experiment to see if that can help them to become more of who they are.
Definitely. And I think somatic coaching, I can't make a direct connection with Gestalt, but I think it definitely has some origins in the Gestalt movement, because that was all. So Fritz Perls, when he was in California, he'd run retreats where people would go and they would do that sort of embodiment stuff. And so, definitely there is a connection there.
There we go, and I didn't even realise it.
Yeah. So, yes, so you are a Gestalt coach.
Or integrative,
yes.
as are you.
Yes.
It sounds like quite a lot of fun could be had with Gestalt.
Yeah, definitely. And you have to be careful. So there's a lovely story of someone who was coaching someone who was saying that they felt very tied up in whatever it was that was going on for them. They couldn't get past it because they felt tied up in it. So the coach actually tied them to the chair to see how that would feel. No, I'm not advocating that approch. You might get a complaint
very
about
inappropriate.
that. But just that experimenting.
What did his insurance company think of this?
I don't know. I don't know. It might just be a story, but an interesting example of how you might work with what it is that's coming up for the coachee.
Or might not.
Or might not work with them in that way. But it's definitely an approach that because I think, we are very interested in transformational change, and we're not just, okay, here's a goal, let's head for the goal.
Yeah.
We'll achieve the goal. Okay, great. Off you go. You've done what you said you wanted to do. We are really interested in transformational change and the person becoming different as a result of our coaching.
Or becoming more them.
Becoming more them. Yeah.
This is absolutely fascinating. I'm loving this conversation, and it sounds like there's lots of tools and processes potentially that we could use that stem from this approach.
Yeah, so one of the most common things that people will use is the empty chair exercise.
Yes.
We're not going to cover that too much in here, but that is about getting someone to see things from other people's perspective. And I had great success in using that approach with people, where they will sit in someone else's chair and talk as though they're having that conversation in the moment. So again, going back to that idea of bringing things into the present. So if you've got someone who had a conversation a week ago with their boss and they start talking about it, it's then that narrative of, okay, well, he said this and I said this, and it all becomes just a bit of a story to actually, okay, well, let's bring that conversation into the room. Let's hear from you. What was going on for you in that conversation? And they'll talk through it. And then to get, okay, now be that other person. Let's be your colleague. You're now your colleague. What's going on for you in that conversation? And to get them to talk it through as though... Now, if you're empathetic, as I've done this a few times for myself, I do go to that place of just almost becoming emotional, knowing how the other person would have been feeling in that conversation.
Yeah.
But it certainly allows you to stand in their shoes, sit in their seat. It allows you to see things from a different perspective. And suddenly the story you were telling yourself perhaps isn't quite the same story. Something has changed. So I think that can be really helpful. So that is definitely about bringing whatever's going on for the coachee into the room and working with it in the room. And that could be a future conversation. So if it's someone that wants to have a conversation at work about the way that they're working, actually, well, let's bring that conversation into the room. Let's hear from you. You're now having that conversation. What do you want to say? Well, let's hear from the other person. So we're not role playing. I'm not going to make things up. But the coachee can sit in their place. They'll have some knowledge of the other person, and they can sit and talk back as though they're the other person. And it can be really, really powerful. I don't think I've ever done it without it having an impact.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I had one chap that halfway through went, "How the hell do I know what she's thinking? This is stupid." But actually, what was really interesting was that the body language he demonstrated from this lady he'd got some disagreement with was very power posing. He was standing in a way that was very dominant, and when he talked through his situation, he sat in a way that was very submissive. So it told us something about the relationship, which was interesting again to play back and say, "Oh, I noticed when you did that this was happening," and then so it can be really powerful, even if people don't necessarily.
Even when it doesn't work, something
even
can
when
work.
It doesn't work,
yeah.
It's an experiment. Something will have changed. So I'm sure that in him doing that exercise, he will have had a new understanding of what was going on in that relationship.
Sounds like something, though, that coaches might need to practice and get used to before experimenting with actual clients.
You could say that, but actually it is an experiment.
Yeah.
You know, I do it differently every time. And, you know, I demonstrate it on a transformational coaching diploma, and I don't think I do it the same every time. Definitely there are bits that I just think, oh, well, I won't use that. So one of the other ways to use the exercise is to take an object that's in the room and speak as though you are that object looking in on a conversation or looking in on an experience, which again sounds strange, but it can be really powerful. But sometimes I use that, sometimes I just use the conversation that's happening between two people. But it can be really powerful. So that really, in a nutshell, is Gestalt. So I think that's probably enough for today. And so next time we're going to be exploring the Gestalt cycle of experience, and we'll have a deeper dive into that, because I think that can be really useful in helping a coachee to understand why they're getting stuck in a particular part of the experience, and normalizing that stuckness. So okay, well, this isn't unusual. People do get stuck at this point, and then maybe just freeing them up, allowing them to move on and start to flow through the experience in a different way.
Fabulous. I'm looking forward to that.
Good. Thank you, Helen. I've enjoyed that conversation.
Likewise. And I'd just like to put out there that if any of our listeners have any questions about this approach or other approaches or anything else that we've spoken about on the podcast, they can always drop us a line, and we'll be compiling some questions for a future listeners' questions episode.
Yeah, and if they're feeling inspired to come and learn more about coaching, they can take a look at our transformational coaching diploma for doctors and get in touch with us, and we can let them know when our next cohort will be starting.
Absolutely. And we look forward to speaking with you again on our next episode.
Lovely. Thank you, Helen.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.